The Ottawa real estate market is finally showing signs of life and an unintended consequence of high interest rates. All this and more in your February 2024 Ottawa real estate market update. Andrew, let's hit them with our new and improved theme song. Go. That's still not great. We're gonna have to keep working on the whole theme song thing. Andrew, maybe you can do next month's theme song. Yeah. Those of you watching this may not be aware, but Andrew's actually a pretty good singer. And if you don't believe me, just feed him like, what is it, 5, 6 gin and tonics, and then watch him go. Yeah. Right. Anyways, a little inside joke between Andrew and I, but let's get into it, shall we? So, if you've seen these updates before, you know the vibes. We will start off by talking about the January stats for both freehold and condo sales in Ottawa, and then in the second half of the video, I'll give you a few of my personal insights about things we are seeing in the market and some of the stuff that's been in the news as of late. Stick around until the very end, and if you haven't done so already, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, feel free to buy or sell a house with us as well if you're so inclined. All right, let's dive in. Andrew, can we get those freehold stats up on the screen now, please? All right, so all things considered, January was a pretty good month for freehold sales in Ottawa. Now, quick reminder, freehold refers to homes with no condo fees, or homes where you own the home and the land it's built on. And in January, we sold a total of 545 of those freehold homes in Ottawa. That's about a 17.5% increase in sales volume compared to January of last year, 2023, the year that comes before 2024. And if you're a regular around these parts, then you know that for many months now, our sales volume has been painfully low. So it's nice to finally break away from that trend, at least for a month. Now, 545 homes sold in January, it's not a crazy high total by any means. It's certainly lower than what we were seeing during the peak, which was 2021 and the front half of 2022. But prior to the peak, a typical January would see sales volume fall between like the low 500s and the low 600s. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a normal total. And it feels good to say that. We haven't gotten to say that in a long time. All right, now, of course, as always, time will tell if this is just a blip or the start of a trend, or the sort of normalization of sorts. We will, of course, keep you posted. Moving on, let's talk about inventory. Andrew, inventory is?
Measure of supply and demand.
Yes, nailed it. All right, inventory is a measure of both supply and demand. We ended 2023, started 2024 with 4.2 months of total inventory in Ottawa for freehold. In January, that inventory level came down and we ended the month with about 3.7 months of total inventory. What that essentially means is that for the month of January, demand outpaced supply. Now, 3.7 months would technically put us in a seller's market, albeit a very weak seller's market, okay? But technically a seller's market nonetheless. As always, big disclaimer here, we're painting with very broad strokes when we call this a seller's market. It's a massive oversimplification to just look at months of inventory on its own for the entire city and then declare that Ottawa is in a seller's market or a buyer's market or whatever. But I know that a lot of agents will do just that, and so that's why I bring it up in these updates. Keep in mind here that context matters a lot. One more quick note about inventory. I mentioned last month that inventory levels at this time of year, they can be a little wonky because November, December, January, there are months where a lot of stale listings, right? Like these properties that have been on the market for a while and that haven't sold, they get taken off the market, right? Which can mess with inventory. However, most of that happens in December. If a seller manages to make it to the other side of the holidays, in my experience, they're more likely than not to just kind of keep riding things out. So all in all, I would say that the inventory and sales volume figures for January should be encouraging to those who are hoping to see prices go up and vice versa. Andrew, did you say vice versa or vice versa?
Vice versa.
Yeah. Have you ever heard anyone say vice versa? It drives me nuts. It's one of my pet peeves. Anyways, let's talk about prices. In spite of what I just said about volume and inventory, the average selling price in January was actually flat, right? So it came in at about $682,000 and change. There was a difference of a few $100s between the average selling price for December and the one we saw in January. The average selling price for freehold homes has basically been flat here since November, but make no mistake, when we have rising sales volume and decreasing inventory, it puts a lot of upward pressure on prices. So if what we've seen happen with volume and inventory in January continue, it's safe to say that prices should start to climb. I also, a quick aside here on prices. If you watched my bold predictions video last month, you know that I predicted that the average selling price for freehold homes would remain above $700,000 for every single month in 2024. So, didn't take too long for me to whiff on that one, did it? Swing and a miss. But to be fair, I did also say in my predictions video that if I got that particular prediction wrong, it was likely going to be due to the month of January. That was the month I was most worried about. So I'm gonna give myself like half a point there. It's my scoring system. I make the rules. Andrew, I actually can't remember whether you agreed or disagreed with that prediction. Do you remember?
No.
No. He laughs. No. No. Okay, well, I'm gonna give you 7 points. Anyways, how's that sound?
I like it.
All right, so Andrew has got 7. I've got half a point, and we are moving on. Let's talk about days to sell. Now, this is a stat, days to sell, that I mention every month, but I tend to mention it in passing. I don't usually spend a whole lot of time discussing it because, quite frankly, it's usually not that interesting. But days to sell caught my eye this month. Now, to be clear, when we talk about days to sell, what we're doing is we're looking at all of the properties that sold this month, and then we're calculating the average number of days that those properties were on the market before a firm sale happened, right? So days to sell applies only to sold properties. It does not apply to active listings or unsold properties, and it also does not apply to anything that's conditionally sold. Okay, got it? Perfect. All right, so here's the thing. Not only did the average number of days to sell increase from December to January, but the average days to sell in January was 51 days, which happens to be the highest average we've seen since 2018. Okay, and that's not just for January, that's for any single month. In 2018, that was a long time ago. In 2018, no one had ever heard of COVID. The Raptors had never won an NBA championship. And the #1 TV show in the world was The Big Bang Theory. Andrew, you a big Big Bang Theory guy?
Nope.
Me neither. I don't understand the appeal of that show at all. It is terrible. But anyways, 2018, people were really into The Big Bang Theory for whatever reason. All right, anyways, back to days to sell. You see, in a month where sales volume was good and inventory levels crept down, and they're in seller's market territory, we would intuitively expect days to sell to come down, not go up, much less hit levels we haven't seen in almost 6 years, right? So what's going on here? Andrew, what do you think's going on? Andrew's not sure. All right. Here's what I think is happening. What the days to sell stat tells me is that a lot of these listings that had gone stale, right? They'd been sitting on the market with little to no activity, little to no interest. And all of a sudden, these listings, they're getting traction again, right? And it's not just showings. They're actually receiving offers and they're selling. Taking 51 days, but they're selling, all right? We don't typically see a ton of new inventory come to market in January. Most sellers will prefer to wait until March or April to list their homes. And so the majority of the sales that we saw in January were on old listings, right? Properties that had been sitting out there for a while, hence the high days to sell average. Now, I can tell you from experience that in the back half of 2023, it was not uncommon to have a listing go weeks at a time without a single showing, even when you were priced well. There just weren't any buyers out there. So now, to see a lot of these stale listings start to move has to be very encouraging to anyone who is thinking of selling or who has been trying to sell or who sells homes for a living, right? Last but not least, freehold homes that sold in January on average went for 97.7% of their list price. Nothing too noteworthy there. We expect that stat to fall somewhere between 97% and 99% in the vast majority of the time. Or the vast, no, I didn't say that right, but most of the time, 97 to 99% is what we fall. All right, so that'll do it with the Freehold stats. Now, let's talk about what happened in the world of condos this January. But before we do that, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. This month's market update is brought to you by Ed Hardy T-shirts for men. Ed Hardy T-shirts, the world's most effective form of birth control since 2014. You a big Ed Hardy clothing guy, Andrew?
Never heard of it.
You never heard of Ed Hardy? Did you ever hear of the Jersey Shore?
Talking about Jeff Hardy?
No, no. Ed Hardy is like this really tacky like clothing. Like, they had like big dragons and skulls and stuff on them, and it was like popular in the 2010, 20 range. Anyways, yeah, I never wore Ed Hardy, but to be fair, when I was in my 20s, I did wear a lot of like Abercrombie and Fitch, which is probably not a whole lot better, but live and learn. All right, anyways, let's talk about condos. Andrew, let's put the condo stats up on the screen for our lovely viewers, please. And hey, in honor of our sponsor this month, let's also get a really gaudy looking dragon or a skull or something up there with the stats. Oh, yeah. All right, love it, nice. All right, so we sold a total of 168 condos in Ottawa for the month of January. That's about 11% more than we sold in December, the month that comes before January. And it's also about 11% more than we sold in January of last year, 2023, the year that comes, you get the point. All right, so 168 compares favorably to very recent totals. However, it's still a bit below what we've come to expect for a typical January, where we'd normally be around 200 units sold, give or take. Now, we started the month in January with 3.5 months of condo inventory, and we ended the month with 3.4 months. So a slight drop there. Condo inventory actually peaked at 3.6 months in November, and it's basically been inching down very slightly ever since. I would say for all intents and purposes, it's basically been flat. As with Freehold, condo inventory levels would suggest that we are in a very weak seller's market. I won't redo my whole disclaimer spiel here, but it also applies, right? It's generalization. Now, the average selling price for a condo in January was $413,000 and change. That's about a 4% drop from December, where we finished around $431K. However, if you pay attention to these videos, you already know that I do not view that drop as being significant, because condo prices do tend to bounce around from month to month. And for a very, very long number of months now, the average selling price for condos in Ottawa has landed somewhere between $410,000 and $450,000 every single month. So 413K near the bottom of that range, but it's within that range, right? So it's really still within what we've come to expect over the course of the last year plus now, all right, for condos. Once we eventually break out of that range, then it'll pique my attention. All right, also, I actually want to make a quick aside here on selling price. I was asked in the comments section of my last update why I use the average selling price instead of the median selling price in these videos. I know there's different schools of thought here, and I can appreciate that there are some people who feel like the median is more statistically relevant, right, than an average. The goal of these videos, however, has always just been to educate people about the market in a way that is accessible and as easy to digest as possible. Hopefully even a little fun. Andrew, you're having fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much fun are you having right now?
11.
Oh, 11 out of 10. All right, hopefully the viewers are also at an 11. Anyways, averages, they're just more commonly used in everyday life, let's face it. And so I've always felt that for a lot of people, talking about an average sell price is something that's easier for them to understand. It's easier to conceptualize than a median sale price, even if they mean similar things. So that's why we use averages instead of medians in these updates. Also, we're dealing with pretty large sample sizes here on a month-to-month basis. And as a result, both the average and the median, they're always gonna move in the same way. And that's really what we're interested in here. It's about how things are trending. It would be pretty meaningless of me just to give you with an average or a median without any context whatsoever. All right, so hope that clears him. I I hope that clears things up. And hey, if you are a diehard median lover, you can always just message me privately and I will be happy to provide you with those statistics. So closing out the condo stats here, units that sold in January on average had been on the market for 54 days prior to selling. That's the same sort of thing we saw for Freehold, in that it's the highest total for any given month since way back in 2018 when Andrew was watching Big Bang Theory religiously. All right, I will tell you that I think the explanation is the same. A lot of units that had been sitting on the market are all of a sudden getting traction and they're selling again. All right, and lastly, condos that sold in January on average went for 97.4% of their list price. Nothing too interesting about that. All right, so that will do it for the stats. Now it's time for the part of the video where I give you a few of my personal takeaways about things we are seeing in the market. All right, so there's a few things I want to touch on this month. First and foremost, takeaway number one, and you've probably already figured this out if you watched the first part of this video, but it's really starting to feel like the market is waking up again after a long slumber. All right, so in my industry, the 4 or 5 weeks that make up the back half of December and the first part of January, they tend to be pretty quiet. It's when most agents will go on vacation or just take some time off to rest and recharge, maybe do their taxes, business planning, whatever, right? I can tell you that this year personally, and I've been doing this for 9 years now, I have never, ever been as busy in the months of December and January as I have been this December and this January. Now, of course, I am but one humble man. I like basketball, pastries, kittens, and selling the shit out of your home. So I certainly don't pretend to represent or to speak for the entire Ottawa real estate market, right? My experience is anecdotal at best, but I have spoken to a lot of colleagues who are seeing the same sort of thing in their respective businesses as well, right? People are much busier than they've been for the last little while. Now, going back to my own experiences here, I can tell you that in January, I wrote offers on 5 different properties for 5 different clients in different parts of the city. In 3 of those 5 situations, the properties ended up getting multiple offers, right? In January, at a time where everything is normally super slow and we're mostly looking at leftover properties, right? So 3 out of 5, 60% of the time, multiple offers. And those multiple offers, they all happened organically. None of those properties had set offer dates. None of them were artificially underpriced in order to generate a bidding war. They were listed at market value and they just happened to receive interest from multiple buyers. I can also tell you that most of the homes I've shown to my buyer clients in the past month have since sold. We're getting to our showings now and we're seeing other people again, right? It's like, oh wow, like other buyers out there. I'm not the only one who has got a buyer right now, right? We're showing up and there are buyers and their agents who are leaving the property as we're getting there. And then as we're leaving, there are another set of buyers and their agents who are showing up. So open houses are getting busy again. Things are really starting to move. We're also starting to hear a lot of crazy bidding war stories coming out of the GTA again, right? So some homes over there, they're getting dozens of offers. They're selling for way over the asking price again. There was a home in Mississauga recently that received 85 offers. It made the news. Now, of course, that's Toronto, right? Ottawa and Toronto, different markets, different cities, right? But here in Ottawa, we do tend to follow their lead, albeit to a lesser degree, all right? So, you know, this is all just 1 month, and this is all just, once again, just anecdotal. Maybe February will be totally dead. Who knows, right? But I will say this. It feels like the writing is on the wall here. And so if you're thinking about making a move this year, now is the time to get organized, right? I'm not saying to rush and change your timelines, right? You should always make your move when the timing is right for you. Don't let anyone tell you differently. But what I am saying is that it is a good idea to get your pre-approvals in place. It's a good idea right now to start figuring out your finances, to get your house in order, because it does feel like the pace of the market is picking up. And in a fast-moving market, more than in any other market, the best opportunities will go to the people who are the best prepared. My final couple of takeaways are going to touch on interest rates, everyone's favorite topic. All right? For those who are unaware, the beginning of January, during their planned announcement, the Bank of Canada kept interest rates right where they are. You probably saw like 10,000 realtors posting about that on their social media accounts, right? So there was no hike. We actually haven't had a hike in interest rates since July of 2023. And the very, very large majority of economists at this point believe that we won't see any further hikes and that rates will actually start coming down toward the back half of 2024. So, obligatory reminder here, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but if and when rates come down, you can expect prices to rise, right? In fact, it would not surprise me at all to see prices move up as a result of just keeping rates flat, right? And then seeing them like really take off when rates come down, if and when rates come down in a meaningful way. Which takes me to my final observation for this month. And this ties into the whole interest rate conversation. So here's the deal. You may agree or disagree with me on where you believe the market's going, right? Whether prices will go up, come down, crash, whatever, right? We've touched on that topic a million times. I'm not gonna rehash it here. To each their own. And it's all fine and dandy, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, but the one thing I think everyone can agree on is that one of, if not the biggest challenge we have right now when it comes to housing in this country is a lack of supply, right? We just don't have enough homes. Now, one of the unintended consequences of the unrelenting rate hikes that we were bashed over the head with throughout the course of the past 18 months or so is that it led to a lot of real estate developers or builders to pause their development activities. So according to CMHC data, and that's the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, right? So according to their data, we actually built about 25% fewer homes in Canada in 2023 than in the previous year, 2022. Right? In Ottawa specifically, we built 40% fewer homes in 2023 than we did in 2022. And when I say homes here, I mean new rentals and new homes for sale, okay? And by the way, we were still building far too few homes in 2022 to keep up with the needs of our population. So to take a big step backward in 2023, it's kind of a disaster given the current state of housing supply in this country. Because you see, in spite of what you may think, when one of these big rich developers wants to build a subdivision or a high-rise tower, they almost always have to borrow money to do so. And so when you increase what it costs to borrow money, you increase what it costs a developer to build a home. And this is happening at a time where developers are also having to deal with shortages and high costs when it comes to materials, when it comes to skilled trades, and when it comes to labor. And so what do you think happens with all these increased costs? The developers, they just eat them? No, right? The costs get passed on to the buyer. Only there are no buyers anymore, right? With the high purchase costs and the high interest rate, we eventually got to a point somewhere between late 2022 or early 2023 where new construction just became too expensive for most people. And a lot of builders started having a really tough time selling their products. And now, some of those builders have pivoted to building, purpose-built rentals rather than homes for sale, but a lot of them have little interest in becoming large-scale landlords. And so, a lot of these big builders, they ended up just calling a timeout, right? They stopped building, which ultimately meant less supply at a time where the demand or need for housing is increasing, right? Again, not good. It's not good. And let me preempt you here. I know what a lot of people watching this are going to say. They're going to roll their eyes and they're going to say that this is an example of builder greed, right? Why can't these builders just take lower profits and build more affordable housing, etc.? I've heard it a million times. Here's the thing. Contrary to popular belief, the profit margins on new construction are not as big as most people would assume. Builders make their money on volume. The rule of thumb is that a developer's profit margin on a new build, it's usually around 15%. Give or take. That is not a particularly large margin, especially when you consider all of the risks and the headaches involved with large-scale development. All right? Like, have you ever tried to just, renew your health card or have a pothole on your street patch? Like, you know what kind of headache you have to go through? Imagine the kind of red tape and the hoops you have to jump through to build a subdivision, right? In this city, in this province, in this country, right? And so developers they're not gonna build when they can't make a profit, much less sell their product. And so they stop, right? They sit on their land and they just wait for the numbers to make sense again. And as a result, we end up building far fewer homes at a time where we desperately need to be building a bunch more. Okay, so where am I going with all this? Let's see if I can land the plane on this one. There are a bunch of different things that you can point to as having played a role in our current housing shortage. Some of those things are fair, some of them maybe not so much, right? Like Andrew, did you know that a lot of people blame realtors, think realtors are responsible for the high cost of housing?
Yeah, on Reddit.
On Reddit, yeah, exactly, on Reddit. A lot of people on Reddit think that realtors are responsible for the high cost of housing. And to the people on Reddit, and anyone else who thinks that, I ask, do you really think that we realtors are that smart, right? Do you, like we have some sort of secret society that controls the price of housing? You really think that most agents literally can't figure out how to open one of those lock boxes with a dial on it. But you think that we found a way to organize and manipulate massive commodities markets in between filming our fucking TikTok videos? Come on, come on. All right, anyways. One of the things that is nearly impossible to argue, at least logically, is that the more we grow the gap between housing supply and housing demand, the worse things get, right? For just about everyone on so many different levels. And so the most logical path to some semblance of housing affordability is through an increase to our housing supply to the point where the supply meets the demand or maybe even exceeds it, right? And the way you do that, and this is the part where people are gonna get real upset in the comments, but the way you do that, right, the quickest way to do that is to make development profitable, right? And the Bank of Canada and a lot of the powers that be have started to allude to that in their messaging, right? Now, they're definitely not gonna come out and say, hey, we need to help developers make more money, right? They're not gonna say that. But more and more, the messaging as of late has been, hey, these interest rate hikes and these new taxes aren't really gonna solve our core issue when it comes to housing. And we're starting to see the conversation shift from how do we keep housing prices down to how can we provide enough housing supply, right? And so it feels like we're in this position now where we have to kind of choose between the lesser of two evils, right? There's no good option. On one hand, if you keep interest rates high, you might keep housing prices from taking off, right? You'll suppress them, but you're also likely going to cause the supply gap to grow, which can only really hurt affordability in the long run. So, like, unless the goal is to fix the supply gap by making things so unbearable here that everyone just leaves Canada, then you're really only left with the second option, which is to bring rates down, knowing that it will almost certainly cause housing prices to go up, but that it will also encourage more development, which in the long run could help us close the supply gap and hopefully return some semblance of affordability to the market eventually, right? It's a tough spot for sure. It certainly feels like any solution is gonna require a bit of like a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back approach. I know a lot of people would suggest that we should just subsidize the whole thing, you know, have the government kind of step in and take care of it. But when you look at the number of homes we need and you look at the cost to build just one home, you quickly realize that it's just not feasible. It's too much money. Love them or hate them, you need developers. And developers, they need to make a profit to build their for-profit organizations, right? So if the Bank of Canada does in fact lower interest rates this year, it will be very interesting to me to see what type of impact that will have on the number of new homes we build in 2024, which again, to me, is really what we need to be focusing on first and foremost. We need to encourage new development. As usual, we'll be paying attention and we will be sure to keep you posted. That'll do it for this month's update. As always, if you'd like to chat about your personal real estate situation, your real estate goals, you can use the Calendly link in this video's description to access my calendar and book a discovery call for me at a time that works for you. And if you look at the Calendly link and you don't find a time slot that works for you, just send me an email and I will see if I can move some things around. All right, once again, thank you for watching my videos. I'm Serge Papineau. That's Andrew. You can't see him, but he's there. We will see you next month.
Can I